And so a new year in the garden begins. And this is January. Well, it is the end of January because I did not do any gardening this month because everything is asleep, including myself. But today it was one of those beautiful, dry, sunny days, the day after a really bad storm. And I decided I wanted to come out, assess the damage, and do a bit of pottering and some jobs. I just went to push the wheelbarrow and I have a flat tire. How does that happen? I wonder, was it like the frost? Did I get a puncture? And also, this is a new tire. Well, do you know what happened? I lent my wheelbarrow to my brothers and I think one of them must have given it a little slow puncture on me. So, oh no. My brother is a mechanic and I rang him and I told him that I had a flat tire. Now, I didn't tell him what tire was flat. I don't think he was too happy when he realised it was a wheelbarrow tire, but he helped me out all the same. Also, my wheelbarrow is ancient. People always tell me to get a new one, but why? This one is working just fine. My brother welded the leg of it back on. I did lend it to them and I think that's why the tyre is going flat now. I am going to need to get a new tyre because there is a slow puncture in this. So Storm Eowyn, I don't know if I am pronouncing that right. I don't know why they just didn't call the storm like Owen, make it easier for us to pronounce. We had a status red storm, which was the first proper storm of the year. And it's been a while since we had a status red warning. So there was like a stay at home advisory. And I was really lucky because aside from my little mirror display thing above the flower bed, I had no damage. I also had to make sure to check in on the bees and the bees were grand. I'll have a little bee update at the very end of the video. So I secured down as much as I could. Thankfully my garden is a bit sheltered because there is some trees around it, there is the wall, but I do worry about, the greenhouse if something was to fall on it, especially in the middle of the night when you hear the wind absolutely just howling through the window and when you hear roof tiles moving as well. But myself and my neighbour, we just checked over and everything seems fine on the roof and in the garden, so we were really lucky. And also our power didn't go. So many people had a power outage and I was really lucky. I got up in the middle of the night and I made a cup of tea while there was power just in case. My first job of the year is I am doing a bit of mulching. I don't want to tidy up too much because at the end of the day it is January. While I might have a bit of energy today, I know that there's probably a lot of sleeping insects. Birds probably want to feed off the things that I've left go to seed, so I'm not going to try and do the whole garden in one go. I want to tackle the 4 raised beds that are out the back. In the raised beds, I have loads of spring bulbs for cut flowers and I want to mulch these first before all of that foliage starts to grow a bit more. I find once the foliage is up, I'm afraid to throw the mulch on in case I damage the flower. But while they're at this small stage, I am going to put on a thick layer of mulch. I also have a confession. I didn't cut back my dahlias in December and we have had frost. Now thankfully it hasn't been too bad. I'll show you at the end of the video, but we did have a frosty couple of days early January. Last year I did leave the dahlias in the flower beds and I just mulched them, so I cut them back and I put a thick layer of mulch on them and they all came back. But this year the frost got them. However, the tuber doesn't seem like it's rotten. So I've just cut back any of the dead foliage and I just kind of poked around at the tuber and it seems quite solid. So I've just put a thick layer of mulch over them in case we do get another frost, which we probably will because it's so early in the year. So I have to just play a wait and see game with the dahlias to see if they come back. I have a good feeling though. These raised beds get some winter sun. They're in a nice warmer spot compared to other areas in the garden. So I'm hopeful that they come back. However, I probably should have taken some cuttings of the dahlias last year as a little insurance policy, but I do have some in the greenhouse in pots, so I'm not too worried, although I would be sad if I lose them. Every spring I order a ton bag of mulch and I use a fine bark wood chip. You can get a thick bark or you can even mulch with farmyard manure. You can also mulch at any time of the year. It's really good at keeping water in the soil and moisture. So in summertime, if it's really dry, you can water the soil and then put a layer of mulch on top to help prevent the water evaporating. I like to mulch because it just conditions my soil. There's certain parts of my garden where it's been a bit of like a heavy clay. So by mulching it every year, it's just improving the condition of the soil. It also makes everything look lovely and tidy. In the flower beds in autumn, I sometimes blow the old leaves into it and let them die down, but it kind of looks a bit messy. So this time of year, I just throw a layer of mulch over all of that. So it's like an extra duvet for any little hibernating bugs. Here's another layer for you to have a little sleep under. So I'm trying not to take away. I am just putting a big thick layer over everything. All the old leaves can rot down, and so will this mulch over time. Also, I am weeding these beds as I'm going, and there's not a lot of weeds because mulch naturally helps suppress weeds. And I find I'm not doing half as much weeding as I did when I first began gardening. And that's because I mulch. It also takes me a while to do this. It's not something that I can do in a weekend. I have the new area in the front garden that I did last year. So I have that raised border. I have the side border in the front as well. And then I have the other side in the garden and the little woodland corner. So I've created all these little nooks in my garden. And I try to do just 1 or 2 sections at a time because it can be overwhelming. So instead of being hard on myself and beating myself up if I don't do something in a whole weekend, I just try and do one little section at a time. And speaking of jobs that have been waiting a while to be done, I need to take down the Christmas light. The storm did not blow away my lights, even though I thought it might be handy if they did because it would save me a job. But no, my gutter clips actually worked and they survived the storm. My pot grown Christmas tree is also doing really well. When I took it out of the living room, we had really bad weather, so I just left it sitting in the laneway. So now that I am tidying up the garden, I'm going to bring it and I'm going to just leave it outside of the greenhouse for now. Then I'll find a nice spot for it, and then around about April time I'll feed it and give it a mulch. So as you can see, I still have lots of areas in the garden that are messy that I have just left, and I can tackle them in spring. I think this year the goal in the garden is just to do a little and often. I love that feeling and that buzz you get when something has been messy and then you tidy it up and you're looking out the window. Maybe I'm like washing something in the sink and I'm like, oh, that just looks nice and tidy. But the whole garden doesn't have to look like that. I think sometimes I burn myself out trying to get everything done, and instead this year I'm going to enjoy just the process and the journey and not trying to get everything done all at once. I'd love to know, what are your garden goals this year? Are you keeping it simple, or do you have a big renovation project in the garden, or are you just going to layer on to what you have created over the past few years? In early January, we did have a frosty cold snap. Now, again, I was really lucky. I feel like I'm very lucky being on the east coast of Ireland. The west coast of Ireland, that wild Atlantic way, just gets brutal weather. Anytime we have any storms or bad weather, it always comes in. Poor Galway, Mayo, Cork, Limerick, all those coastal areas. If you are over that side of Ireland and you are watching, my heart goes out because every time I see a weather warning, I'm like, those poor guys out west. Because of where I am, I'm a bit more sheltered and I'm not as exposed to harsh winds either. So I am very lucky. So of course I was out with my camera just getting a few frosty shots, because honestly it's only a handful of times that my garden actually gets this lovely winter look. It normally looks like it does at the start of the video, just a bit grey looking in January, but I do love these frosty mornings. And I was thinking to myself this year, you know, when you're planning ahead for the for the new year. And I see lots of people sharing, January garden content and January garden jobs. And I was saying in one of the Thursday videos about, being slow in January and not being so quick to jump into all that new year energy. And I'm definitely feeling the same in the garden, because at the end of the day, it is winter. One of the main reasons for me getting outside in January is because I just love that feeling. I'm not a fan of the darker days, so any exercise outside, even if it's just shoveling mulch, is just good for my soul. It's like instant serotonin. I love this time of year though, because I notice that the evening and the day is getting a tiny bit brighter by the minute. So I noticed that it was 5 o'clock today and it was still bright, whereas normally it was 4:30 before Christmas. I feel like November just be my worst kind of month when it comes to, sad. January, February, it's like I am slowly starting to wake up. I see spring bulbs and instantly my mood is a million times better. Hello, it is currently -2. Tonight is to get to be rumours of -8, but I think that's going to be up the mountain. I'm just here to check on the bees and it's actually not too bad. So the bees, they maintain a constant hive temperature of I think around 35 degrees, and they're not frosty. So I had images of coming down and the hives would be like full of frost and frozen, but they're not. I was worried about them. So here's how they're looking. So we're frozen here, but the hive itself is not frozen. Let me see. The water is, but they're not going to be coming out anyway. So yeah, it's not, maybe that internal temperature is, can't see much. Now I do have a clear crown board, but I would not be opening this and letting in any cold. So obviously they're not going to come out in this weather, but hopefully they're on the inside and they're nice and toasty. Before the storm, I had to pop down and make sure that all of the hives were strapped in. I was kind of worried because there's a lot of trees around where my hives are, but thankfully they were all okay. I also just quickly checked to make sure that they still had enough feed and fondant. Bees have had a rough January between the frost and the storms, but so far so good. It was Bjorg and Bond's first garden day today, because last year, because they were younger, I wasn't letting them go outside because I wanted them to just be over that 1 year mark and calm down a little bit. So now they are calm enough to come outside. Obviously they have their little, actually a few people asked the trackers that they wear. They're actually Apple AirTags. I don't know if you can see their little names are on them, but they only wear them when they go outside because I read somewhere that these can like get warm or something. But anyway, they only wear those when they go outside. But I'm after doing, I'd say about 4-5 hours in the garden. So the cats have been out with me the whole time and I was wondering where they were. I was like, oh, I better call them in. I came in and I'm just after making a cup of tea and they are sleepy. I don't think they're able for gardening. I'm like, lads, this is January. When it comes June, July and we have those long days, those long gardening days in the garden. So yeah, they're exhausted after their first full day in the garden with me. So I was like, oh yeah, it is the first day. And you know, it's going to be great this year because last year I kept having to like close the door because I didn't want to like let them out accidentally. So they have a little bit more freedom this year and they're really well behaved. So just like Blondie and Pepsi, they stay around the house and there has been no incidents with them bringing home any presents because they're too spoilt. Why would they bring home a mouse when they get 3 meals a day. But yeah, we're gonna sign off because yeah, they need a nap. If you're in that fun planning stage of your garden, it's January and we're thinking of the year ahead. I popped a video up a couple of weeks ago and it is a full year in the garden for last year. So I'm sharing my highs and my lows. And I love this time of year for looking back and getting inspiration for the year ahead, because when you look out the window and you see how dull it is, you can just feel a bit meh. But honestly, looking back at your old garden pictures is such a boost. I'll pop a link to that video if you want to check it out, and hopefully you can get some inspiration. I try to keep my gardening realistic. There is no head gardeners around here. It is pretty much me. And I do share my fails and things that don't work as well as the things that do. So you can check out that video if you want to see more about my garden, especially if it's your first time on the channel. And then for my regular viewers, I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Cheeky thumbs up and I'll see you in the next one.